afternoon from Jakarta, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon from Jakarta, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Welcome to the webinar on accelerating green hydrogen technologies and energy storage for the energy transition. This webinar is part of the Indonesia G20 Presidency 2022 in collaboration between the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Republic of Indonesia and the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. It is a great honor for me, Claudia Linke, to be the MC for today's event. Allow me to first greet our guests for today, Mr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, Expert Staff to the Minister for Strategic Planning, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Indonesia, as the Chair of the Energy Transition Working Group G20 Indonesia 2022. Mr. Alberto Pella, Senior Energy Expert, Directorate General for Infrastructures and Security of Energy Systems, Ministry for Ecological Transition, the Government of Italy. Dr. Prahoro Nur Cahyo, Co-Chair of the Energy Transition Working Group G20 Indonesia 2022, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Indonesia. Mr. Dadan Kusdiana, Director General of New Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Indonesia. Mr. Dolph Gillen, Director, IRENA Innovation and Technology Center, International Renewable Energy Agency, and all the panelists, distinguished development partners, and participants. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here for the webinar on the future of energy globally, which will give a better understanding through discussions of energy storage and green hydrogen technologies to support low-carbon power systems. In this webinar, we'll discuss the experiences and plans in G20 countries in deploying different energy storage technologies to meet different requirements of the power system. For example, from green hydrogen to batteries and pump hydro, to provide energy services that facilitate the decarbonation of the power system while increasing reliability and energy security. It will also debate how the production of green hydrogen can bring flexibility of the operation of power system by showcasing G20 countries' experiences in this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, we will begin the webinar by inviting Mr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, Chair of the Energy Transition Working Group G20 Indonesia 2022, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources Indonesia, to give his opening remarks.
All the speakers and participants, greeting to you all. Good afternoon from Jakarta. I am Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, Chair of Energy Transition Working Group ETWG. Is delighted to welcome you all at the 9th webinar of the ETWG webinar series on hydrogen and energy storage. This webinar titles Accelerating Green Hydrogen Technologies and Energy Storage for the Energy Transition. Although this webinar will discuss around green hydrogen, in G20 perspective, hydrogen applies to all fuels, all technology approach. The G20 members acknowledge the widest variety of energy technologies in producing hydrogen, as hydrogen gas actually has no colors. For a brief information, G20 Indonesia Presidency mandate is cover together, they cover stronger. The presidency has set 3 pillars: global architecture, digital economic transformation, and sustainable energy transition. Energy Transition Working Group ETWG addressing 3 priorities on accessibility, technology, and financing. After the first meeting of ETWG in Yogyakarta, 24 to 25 March, we will convene again for the second ETWG meeting in Labuan Bajo, 23 to 25 June 2022. In the first meeting, G20 members and invited countries welcomed and supported the three priorities in energy transition and the main agenda. We are planning the three deliverables to accelerate energy transition in the meeting and leader summit. We call this the road to Bali. Therefore, among the ETWG meetings will advance energy transition issues through the series of virtual webinars. Today's webinar on hydrogen and energy storage will continue discussion on energy transition discussion in this presidency's year. To the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, I would like to convey our presidency compliments for taking the strategic role as co-organizer of today's webinar. IRENA is now the largest international forum on renewable energy, assembling more than 160 member states. I believe IRENA will find solution for achieving Agenda 2030 sustainable development goals and preparing net zero emission future. Hydrogen energy storage certainly need to be advanced in G20 perspective. First, hydrogen and energy storage are the future energy. They need to be scaled up for more ambitious climate action and sustainable future. In specific for hydrogen, however, only less than half of G20 members has had a national or regional plan for hydrogen. Likewise, among G20 countries, energy storage has been already developed by a few countries with very limited capacities. Therefore, it is important for G20 countries to have the planning and equip hydrogen and energy storage to their respective net zero emission roadmap. Second, hydrogen and energy storage are the key enabling technologies and innovative solutions for accelerating energy transition. Hydrogen will become innovative technologies in transport sector, both light and heavy transport. However, hydrogen will ease the effort in reducing emission in hard-to-abate sectors, such as steel production, mining, and chemical industries. In the G20, the club of the largest economies and largest industrial countries, this will be a critical concern on how we could abate those carbon intensive in heavy industries. In addition, both hydrogen and energy storage will essentially support the development of various resources of renewables to solve intermittency issues through viable renewable energy. Third, hydrogen and energy storage will make international cooperation in energy transition more active than ever before. The more use of hydrogen and the more growing demand of energy storage will need strengthened and more trusted alliances to ensure that accessibility, affordability, and security of those technologies. Realizing this all, G20 members would set solid norms and closer cooperation to tap opportunities from hydrogen and energy storage to make energy transition just and done smoothly. Without further ado, to IRENA, all speakers from multi-level entities, all G20 members and invited delegates, and all stakeholders, I wish you all have a successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yudo, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, next we invite Mr. Alberto Pella, Senior Energy Expert, Directorate General for Infrastructures and Security of Energy Systems, Ministry for Ecological Transition, the Government of Italy.
G20 presidency. The role of innovative clean energy technologies represents a key element of continuity with the membership communities on promoting groundbreaking clean technologies at global level. Some of these technologies are in fact already green, such as solar renewable energy sources. Others, such as green hydrogen, represent a strategic solution. While the vast offered by such new technologies are clear, barriers need to be. This includes challenges, costs that are still too high. Scale up will therefore be critical to fully exploit their potential and allow them to play a crucial role in our best positioned in terms of capacity as well as economic power to drive it and to foster innovative renewable energy technologies worldwide. With regard to the hydrogen sector in particular, Italy foresees the role of green hydrogen will play an essential role in our energy transition. We consider a priority setting a challenging targets in the transport 150 tons of 2.2% of transport final consumption, and around 350 tons in the industrial one. So hydrogen can help to build back better while contributing to reach clean energy transition goals. Green hydrogen can play a double role for Italy. In the short term, the green vector will become progressively competitive in selected applications, enabling the development of a national hydrogen ecosystem. In the longer run, up to 2050, it can help in the decarbonization effort together with other clean technologies, especially in the hard-to-abate sectors. In addition to that, hydrogen blending in the gas grid, as tested in Italy, can be used to anticipate and stimulate the hydrogen market growth. No less important, also hydrogen for Italy represents a strategic topic of important project of common European interest framework aimed at supporting large-scale industrial development of green hydrogen projects. The initiative registered the participation of about 150 Italian companies, showing the deep interest of the industrial sector to accelerate the energy transition through the green hydrogen source. At international level, Italy plays an active role in the most relevant multilateral initiatives in the hydrogen sector, such as emission innovation, clean hydrogen mission. Moreover, Italy supports a collaborative framework on green hydrogen promoted by RINA and Clean Energy Ministerial Initiative on hydrogen. Focus on policies and programs are required to enable greater commercial scale deployment of hydrogen. So we believe the innovative clean technologies represented by green hydrogen and energy storage solutions is a sector that requires a strengthened international collaboration at global level. In this context, we welcome the G20 presidency activities focusing on storage systems and green hydrogen sectors, sharing experiences and policies facilitating synergies between G20 and non-G20 countries. So, colleagues, let me thank again the G20 presidency and ARENA for our involvement in the webinar and all participants for the wide and high-level participation. I look forward for a very productive discussion today. Thank you.
Grazie, Mr. Pella. Thank you for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, next we invite Mr. Dolph Gillen, Director, Arena Innovation and Technology Center, International Renewable Energy Agency. Mr. Gillen, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining. Many thanks to Chair Mr. Priadi for your kind opening remarks and highlighting the importance and role of the Energy Transition Group, which brings important insights not only to the G20 community, but also to all emerging economies in ASEAN and beyond. Also, thanks to Mr. Pella for emphasizing the critical role of the G20 Troika in giving continuity to the group's work. The energy sector in G20 countries has experienced a profound change over the last decades, and G20 countries have been at the forefront of the energy transition with strong and continuously increasing political momentum. The group must work together to continue implementing ambitious plans to decarbonize economies within their boundaries and beyond. According to the IRENA World Energy Transitions Outlook, countries should work together to ensure renewables make up 65% of power generation by 2030, up from around 30% today. All along, a just transition is fundamental, and this creates an opportunity for knowledge exchange on initiatives and best practices. The electrification of end use permits the replacing of technologies that use fossil fuels today while enhancing energy efficiency. Nevertheless, the full energy sector's full decarbonization potential can only be achieved by accelerating deployment of renewables in the power sector, particularly solar and wind. According to the 1.5-degree pathway of the World Energy Transitions Outlook, half of final energy should be electricity by 2050, and another 12% of final energy will come from hydrogen and e-fuels. So the critical role of renewable energy in net zero national plans is clear. Electricity demand is expected to increase over 5-fold in our most aggressive climate scenarios for the ASEAN, driven by significant electrification across sectors, compounded with rapid growth of demand in the region. And renewables will become the backbone of the power system. Given the variable nature of solar and wind, flexibility measures must be fully exploited across the power system to manage large shares of variable generation effectively. And for that, we need innovative operations and measures, from power generation to transmission, from storage to smartly charged EVs, to the flexible production of green hydrogen. IRENA has identified 30 types of innovations that can contribute to flexibility, and battery storage is one of these. In optimizing electricity systems with high shares of variable renewables, it's crucial to understand the broad spectrum of storage technologies and the types of services they can provide to the system. There's a lot of activity worldwide on this topic. In fact, the global battery manufacturing capacity worldwide is projected to increase from around 600 gigawatt hours in 2021 to 2,500 gigawatt hours in 2025. So a 4-fold increase in only 4 years. That's manufacturing capacity for stationary batteries, but the bulk of these batteries will go into electromobility. So there is an increasing opportunity for sector coupling, and there is now a lot of attention how we can use these EV batteries also for integration of higher shares of variable renewables, and it's one of the topics we will discuss today. Green hydrogen is poised to play also a key role in bridging the gap for long-term energy storage. It offers an opportunity to tap into remote, low-cost renewable power potentials and transporting that hydrogen or hydrogen-derived fuels to the markets. So hydrogen can also be a critical option to create additional flexibility. And focusing on ASEAN, IRENA will release the second renewable energy outlook for the region in early September. We have been engaging experts across the region over the last 1.5 years. I'm grateful for the support of the ASEAN Secretariat and the ASEAN Center for Energy. We'd also like to thank the government of Denmark for their voluntary contribution to IRENA to support this work. At the national level, IRENA is working with the governments of Indonesia and Malaysia on in-depth outlooks. We look forward to the G20 Energy Transition Investment Forum and the Energy Transition Ministerial meetings in early September in Bali, where we'll present the findings of this work. So today, we will focus on storage and green hydrogen. And I'm confident that today's discussion will provide useful insights how to accelerate the energy transition in G20 countries, particularly leveraging storage and electrolysis. And I thank you again for participating today and look forward to a lively discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gillen, for the remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, to deliver the keynote speech on the role of energy storage technologies under the context of energy transitions in G20 countries, we invite Mr. Dadan Kusdiana, Director General of New Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Mr. Dadan, the screen is yours.
Ada? Okay. So thank you again to the MC and so to the preparation. Very good afternoon from Jakarta. I would like also to thanks to my colleagues, Pak Yudo, and also to Mr. Alberto Pella for the welcoming remarks. And also I would like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the IRENA, in particular to Mr. Dolph Gillen. I think this is my second time also to see you on the screen. We had this mirror webinar, I think 2 weeks ago. So thank you for this cooperation in having the serial of the workshop. I believe that IRENA is one of the most important international organization in accelerating the energy transition toward the net zero emission. So my colleagues, my friends, participants, energy transition is very important in this global climate situations where 1.5 degrees remaining barely within the reach. It even becomes the pressure issue post COP26 in Glasgow, where the Paris Agreement rulebook was adopted. Indonesia is of course aware on this and raised the sustainable energy transition as one of the 3 pillars of the Indonesia G20 presidency in 2022. According to the World Economic Forum 2021, where the last also, I think last month in Davos, over the last 50 years, the energy mix of G20 countries has changed and is becoming more diversified. G20 countries have started increasing their share of renewable energies in UN Convention on Climate Change and also the Kyoto Protocol. I think it was 30 years ago. The Climate Transparency Report noted that renewables in the power sector increased by 20% between 2015 and 2020. The shares of renewable energy supply is projected to grow from 10% in 2020 to 12% in 2021. This number is just similar with us here in Indonesia. Our share on renewable energy is 12.16%. So we are also in the normal achievement between G20 members. The transforming an energy system dominated by renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, as also mentioned by Irena, comes with challenges, especially in terms of grid stability. To effectively manage a large share of variable renewable energy in the power sector, sources of flexibility need to be planned. This means assessing resources from power generation to transmission and distribution systems, storage in both electrical and thermal, and different levels of demand responses. So we know that the energy storage is very important to support the implementation of the energy transition. Energy storage can be increased, but can increase the flexibility of the power system and also facilitate its decarbonization through renewables. There are many options of energy storage technology. We know battery, pump storage, and also the one that we are discussing now is the green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is expected to be one of the contributors to the energy transition, not just as energy storage, but also has an important role in decarbonizing the global energy system. I believe that green hydrogen and also energy storage will be the game changers for energy transition toward the net zero emission. And also, I believe that the technological advancement in the production of the green hydrogen and also the battery, the economic viability will be much more better very soon in the future to go to the implementation in the commercial stage. This again will provide the new pathway for us in accelerating the energy transition and also to go to the net zero emission. We can use, for example, the green hydrogen. It's not only for the electricity, but it also can be used in the sector, for example, applications such as in cement, ceramics, and glass manufacturing, which is those industries are heavily using the fossil fuel. The one that is also important for us is that using the hydrogen can be also promoting the renewable energy. Of course, there are some key factors of green hydrogen implementation. Among others, we heard also from Italian colleagues that policy establishment, access to resources, potential market, the standard, technology availability, and of course the financial support. However, there are some challenges in terms of developing different energy storage technologies to meet different requirements of the power system. In particular, how then the green hydrogen economically viable, financially attractive, and useful to society. Of course, each country has different characteristics in green hydrogen development, but has similar needs of technology and funding. So I would like to echo the statement from the Italian that we need some technology sharing, we need some cooperation between G20 in terms of the technology development. Based on the current Indonesia Net Zero Emission 2060 roadmap in energy sector, starting from 2035, the additional power capacity will be dominated by variable renewable energy in the form of solar power plant. This dominated VRE will need energy storage systems. In the roadmap itself, we already plan the utilization of energy storage such as pump storage will be in 2025, and battery energy storage system massively will be used in started in this year. Also, hydrogen will be utilized gradually, starting from 2031 when we start also the early retirement of coal-fired power plant, and massively by 2051 and reach 50 gigawatt by 2060. The development of green hydrogen in Indonesia is supported by our enormous renewable energy potential. We have so far 3,700 gigawatt that has been identified as the renewable energy potential. Our Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, in cooperation with German government through GIZ, have studied the potential market of green hydrogen in the country. So around 1 million kiloton in the year of 2021, including for industries as in the use for urea, ammonia, refinery industries, and also as the source for methanol, and other demands such as biofuel making, use in the green steel, the island grid, and heavy vehicle fuel cell. The number is then expected to continue, of course, to increase when we come also to the use as the energy carrier. From the current demand, we need around 11.5 gigawatt of renewable energy to fulfill that demand. The government of Indonesia has included the regulation on hydrogen in our draft of new renewable energy law. We also introduced carbon tax on broader industrial sectors and provide attractive financial incentive for public and private sectors to accelerate the renewable energy adoption, including hydrogen as clean energy source in transportation, power generation, and industrial sectors. Currently, there are some initiatives, the planned green hydrogen investment and pilot projects that are now still progressing, such as hybrid green hydrogen from solar and wind in East Sumba in the size of 7 to 8 megawatt, and also pilot project in Ulubelu. This is by utilizing geothermal condensate. We know that in Iceland, they also has been using geothermal as the resource for energy for the green hydrogen productions. Project plan in North Kalimantan and Papua from a large hydrogen power plants. We have very good preparation with German company on how to start in the commercial level in using the renewable energy. So green hydrogen utilization in new capital city by 2045. So 4,000 ton for public transportation and the other 21,000 ton for the use in the industry. So in closing, in line with the main topics raised by G20 Energy Transition Working Group this year, which are energy access, smart and clean technology, and also financing, promoting technology sharing access and financial support must be evenly available among G20 countries. So this will include knowledge and best practices sharing. So therefore, G20 Energy Transition Working Group, in which the second meeting will be held, I think, next week, will encourage deliverables on green hydrogen as follows. This is our proposal. The first is encourage sharing of knowledge and experience between countries in hydrogen development. The second is green hydrogen standard adopted by G20 countries to accelerate the development. The third is ensure hydrogen technology is accessible to all countries. And the last, support the availability of substantial funding for hydrogen that can be accessed again also by all parties with an attractive mechanism. So I do sincerely hope that this event will provide some recommendation, input for our common principles in accelerating clean energy transition. We call it as Bali Compact, as well as also concrete deliverables of Indonesia G20 presidency. So I'm looking forward also for the fruitful discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dadan, for the keynote speech. And ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, we will have the first session of our roundtable discussion with the topic of energy storage technologies to support the operation of a decarbonized power system. In this session, there will be a series of presentations from 5 speakers from IRENA, India Energy Storage Alliance, and Terna. And the discussion will be moderated by Mr. Francisco Boschel, analyst at Technology Standards and Markets IRENA. Mr. Boschel, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and I welcome everyone also to this first panel discussion of the event. This first panel discussion, as mentioned, will be focused on energy storage technologies, mainly battery technologies. And as Mr. Kudiana already mentioned, the call for a renewables-based power system also calls for more flexible grids. And definitely energy storage technologies are key technologies to ensure such a flexibility. However, in IRENA, we are doing additional work based on the request from our member countries to better understand certain aspects that require more attention. Not only on the technology options for the different types of storage technologies that can provide different types of applications and services, but also topics like how to monetize the value of such services to create a good business case for these technologies. Also, what are the innovation ecosystems that can benefit these technologies to be accelerated in deployment? For example, linkages to digitalization, electric vehicles charging, etc. And also, what are the changes or innovations in regulatory frameworks and new business models that can accelerate the deployment of these technologies? So we are delighted to have today stellar panel members joining today. We will have 3 experts from the International Renewable Energy Agency giving us the latest trends and insights on how to value monetize the value of energy storage technologies, the innovation ecosystem, and cost and performance trends for energy storage. And we will also have representatives from 2 G20 countries, India and Italy, going more deep on on-the-ground experiences in those countries on deploying these technologies and the services that they can provide. I would like to kindly remind our distinguished speakers to please try to observe the time constraints that we have for this session. Limit your presentations to 8 minutes. There will be a clock on the screen that you can see to also keep aware of the time. Without no further ado, then I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Emanuele Taibi, who is the lead of the Power Sector Transformation Team in IRENA, who will be presenting the latest trends on valuing services for energy storage. Emanuele, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me thank the G20 presidency of Indonesia and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of the Republic of Indonesia for co-hosting this event with IRENA. So I would really like to run you through a few slides that would allow me to give a perspective of the role of energy storage in the energy transition. Next slide, please. This is making an echo to what our director Dolph Gillen presented before. On the left-hand side, you see 2019, electricity was 21%, and 26% of it was renewables. This is about the whole energy that we consume, not just electricity, of course. In 2030, this needs to accelerate rapidly. It's compounded by a growth in electricity share, but also a growth in renewables in electricity, more than doubling of that to 65%, with a significant contribution from solar and wind. And the end game, where we need to be to reach 1.5 degree target, it is 51% electricity, of which 90% is renewables. Of this, about 2/3 will be provided by solar and wind, which are variable resources. In addition to that, you see on the top right corner, topic of the next session, hydrogen. In IRENA's scenario, 2/3 of this is produced from green electricity. So it's an additional 8% coming from renewables there, and renewable electricity in particular. Other very important element you see in the picture, of course, is the role of modern biomass, which is not a subject for today. But what we see there is essentially a very rapid growth of electricity in direct use, in molecules, and renewables making up the bulk of this electricity. Next slide, please. So what do we need to do to be able to operate such a very different power system? So what you see there is the flexibility in IRENA's view should be tapped into the broader energy system. So generation was the traditional source for flexibility provided to the power system, in particular thermal and hydro generation being able to follow the load. This is supposed to change very rapidly as we deploy more solar and wind into electricity. So flexibility can come from distribution and transmission level. Storage has a very important role to play, and we will look at this in details in the next few slides. Demand has an important role, and especially sector coupling, which is clearly demand, but it's not demand for electricity. It's demand for heat, demand for molecules like hydrogen, and demand for mobility services. Next slide, or just one more click, please. So this is coming from our innovation landscape work that will be presented further by my colleague Arina. But the idea is that the flexibility will slowly shift from supply towards the whole system, with an important role for storage connected to the grid directly, but also behind the meter on the demand side. Next slide, please. So what can electricity storage provide for renewables integration? And here we talk broadly all technologies. So there are technologies that can provide physical inertia. Most notably, the bulk of electricity storage today in power systems is pumped hydro, and that can provide physical inertia. What has been the main use case for initially deploying batteries has been the so-called fast frequency response. Batteries can respond much faster than any other resource in the system because of their nature, and so they can provide new services like fast frequency response to stabilize the system. Then, of course, storage can contribute to providing operational reserves, which in turn allows you to turn off thermal generators that provide that service today. And of course, load following, time shifting, and long duration storage will be increasingly important as we continue with decarbonization, and there potentially new technologies can come to play. Another important element here is that storage can be standalone, as you say on the bottom right of this slide. So we can provide system services, we can reduce operational impacts, and we can even reduce the need for investments in other assets, especially if they are not highly utilized, for instance, peaking plants, and some of the transmission deferrals can be delivered by storage. On the left-hand side, there is also an important case for generation. In particular, PV plus storage seems to have an increasing role to play for multiple reasons. One is to increase its firm capacity and allow participation in capacity markets. The other one is to really look at the revenues. So from a perspective of a generator, co-locating storage with generation can allow to increase the capture price and therefore maximizing profits. Next slide, please. So this is a chart from our World Energy Transitions Outlook. In this case, we looked into Chapter 5 at the role of different sources of flexibility in a 1.5 degree scenario from IRENA. So let me run you through very briefly. The yellow part is the significant contribution from solar PV, and this is mirrored on the negative axis by three main items. The first one is electrolysis, so production of green hydrogen will be concentrated when electricity prices are low, thanks to abundant availability of solar. The next one is smart charging of electric vehicles that will have a significant role, probably the largest of the three, at least in this slide, to be able to tap into variable renewable resources and charge when these are available. And the last purple part, it's storage. If you can do one or two more clicks, please. This is the part where the storage is charging. And on the positive side, the brown part is when storage is discharging, which is an important service that sector coupling cannot provide because it converts electricity into other services, while electricity storage can both charge and feed back into the grid, providing necessary services and providing energy when it's needed. And there might be a shortage, for instance, as you see here, before the sun ramps up and after it ramps down. Next slide, please. So this is how you expect this to happen in 2050 in the 1.5 degree scenario, again, from the World Energy Transitions Outlook. In particular, you see two different patterns. Countries with very large solar potential that will be expecting to have large shares of solar in a 1.5 degree scenario. And we will hear from both India and Italy today. They would expect to have a charging time very concentrated during the time where solar is available, and then discharging back into the grid either in the evening, depending on the shape of the load, or in the morning and in the evening, like in the case of Italy. This is an expectation and an illustrative scenario just to show how the different systems will drive the utilization of storage. In UK and Canada, you see clearly a different pattern. This is more wind dominated in the case of the UK, and Canada is a combination of wind, solar, and hydropower, which again changes the pattern. Next slide, please. So IRENA has developed a knowledge product for its members, which is called the Electricity Storage Valuation Framework. Why we did that? So we see clearly the value of storage for the decarbonization of the power sector, but we also see a regulatory gap in many countries where there is no monetizable revenue stream or insufficient monetizable revenue streams to be able to actually incentivize the deployment of these assets into the power system. And there are, let's say, profitable operations to make sure that actually investors are interested in building these assets. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do with that is to essentially illustrate how to assess the value of storage for a system, how to understand a little bit the cost annualized next to the value, and then finally identify the potential revenues of a project to make sure that we can identify regulatory measures that would increase this project revenues in between the cost and the value to make the projects viable and start with the deployment. Next slide, please. One more click. One more, please. Concluding, I finished my time and I reached the last slide. So a few takeaways. It's very important to have energy storage in the system to support integration of variable renewables. And of course, large-scale deployment of storage in combination with other resources. We saw hydrogen, which we'll discuss later, but also smart charging of electric vehicles can provide important benefits, not only to the power system, but more in general to the society. And for that, you can really see the World Energy Transitions Outlook. The deployment of storage has been hampered by the missing money problem. So there is a gap in many jurisdictions between the revenues that a project can do and the value it can provide to the system. So regulations need to evolve. Of course, the cost-benefit analysis that we suggest to perform needs to really look at many aspects. One is the technical suitability of different technologies, and there would be a very important role for innovation, but also the comparison of storage with alternatives. So storage is not the only solution, it's part of a portfolio. And of course, we need to be able to understand both the monetizable and non-monetizable benefits that storage can provide to the system and understand which ones would be better tackled by regulation. And so in conclusion, storage is one of many options for decarbonization of the power system. It will be very complementary to solar and wind deployment, and it will really depend on each system with its demand, resource mix, and peculiarities, what will be the role of energy storage in each of the jurisdictions. With this, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Emanuele, and a very insightful presentation explaining the different types of energy storage technology, but also how every power system is different, and the application of services and how to value those services has to be really assessed on a case-by-case basis. Thank you so much, Emanuele. And now let's move to the next speaker, Ms. Arina Anisi, analyst from Innovation at the International Renewable Energy Agency, who will be presenting to us the systemic innovation approach for energy storage. Arina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francisco, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to present today in the next few minutes systemic innovation for flexible power system and what does it mean for storage solution. It's a big part of our work at innovation in IRENA. Next slide, please. So storage technologies are a key technology for integrating more higher share of solar and wind in power system and increasing flexibility in power system. But we see that innovation must go beyond technology. And we need also innovation in business models to monetize the value created by the new technologies. We need innovation in market design to encourage flexibility and incentivize the flexible behavior of the assets. And we also need innovation and new ways to operate the system with all these technologies. This is what we call in IRENA systemic innovation. And only by having innovation in these 4 dimensions, we can have practical on-the-ground solution that could increase finally flexibility in power system for a higher integration of solar and wind. Let's see how we can build storage solution based on systemic innovation. Next slide, please. Starting with enabling technologies, and let's focus on the storage technologies available out here. We identified as key storage technologies first large-scale batteries. First, batteries are flexible and fast-responding technologies, so they can cope with variable generation and help maintain the balance in the system. And large-scale batteries basically have a larger capacity, several megawatt hour to hundreds, and they are generally connected to the distribution or transmission networks, grids, or next to the power generation assets. They can provide a multitude of services to the system, ranging from helping operating the system to providing services to the system operator, to deferral investment in the network and in capacity when it's coupled with variable renewable generation with solar and PV, it can decrease curtailment and smoothen the generation of these power plants, and also it has a role in mini grid setting. Next slide, please. Another key technology in terms of storage are behind the meter technologies. These are smaller batteries, normally ranging from 3 kilowatts to 5 megawatts, and are typically installed behind the meter on the consumer side with the rooftop solar PV. It can provide a lot of benefits to consumers in saving on electricity cost and helping with demand side management, and also having a more flexible demand due to behind the meter batteries. It can help operating the system. Also, it has a great role in mini grid setting when smaller system and getting more, providing more flexibility to a small isolated system. Next slide, please. However, IRENA analyses show that by 2050, most of the battery capacity and battery energy will come from batteries placed in electric vehicles. As you can see, batteries from electric vehicles, global number from passenger cars only would be more than 50 terawatt hour, while in utility scale and utility scale batteries and behind the meter decentralized battery, it will be much lower than that together. So there is a huge flexibility potential actually coming from electric vehicles. And for that, it is very important to have smart charging approach on electric vehicles. Instead of electric vehicles could easily be connected to the grid and overload the grid if charging is not done in a smart way. So that's why smart charging is very important and have a lot of benefits also to harness the synergies between the batteries in electric vehicles and providing services to the power system. Next slide, please. Another storage technology that we look at is thermal energy storage. It has similar benefits with utility scale storage, batteries and small scale batteries. One particular one that it's different, it's seasonal storage, because thermal energy storage, unlike batteries, can store energy for weeks or months, and it has the potential to provide seasonal flexibility to the system. Next slide, please. Now let's look quickly on business model and what innovations emerge on the business model side for storage technologies. And if we look at the consumer side, we see that now consumer is also producing with distributed generation. It's also storing. They have behind the meter batteries, maybe power to heat, like thermal storage technologies, smart charging of electric vehicles. So the new consumer is changing the way it relates to energy. And also all these assets, distributed energy resources, are connected with the Internet of Things or are operated via artificial intelligence. However, how to monetize this value created from these storage technologies and distributed energy resources, it's important. For that, it's important to have new business models emerging. Next slide. And one of the business models we are looking at and we find key, it's aggregators. Aggregators are basically bundling these distributed energy resources to engage in a single entity called a virtual power plant and provide services to the power market as a normal power plant, a regular size power plant. So they can help with load shifting, balancing services for the TSO, and provide local flexibility with the TSO and be remunerated for that. There are several projects that we see around the world in aggregators in Netherlands, Germany, Australia, and much more. Next slide, please. Looking on market design as well, we need innovation in market design. Yes, next slide, to encourage flexibility. And one innovation that it's important, it's to have new and innovative ancillary services. Because ancillary services need to be adapted to the new conditions of the system to increase the flexibility. And we see new products on ancillary service markets emerging, such as fast frequency response reserves in UK that was designed especially for battery to participate and to provide these services. And it's not only about new products, but it's also to allow new market participants to participate in these ancillary services markets. And new market participants means also this battery storage and distributed energy resources and solar PVs, and wind turbines. Next slide, please. Last, innovation in system operation. It's also very important on how to new ways to operate the system with new market design in place and these technologies being available. And one innovation we look at here, it's virtual power lines. It's basically storage system use that virtual power line complement existing infrastructure and offer technically sound and financially viable alternative to reinforcing the power grid where additional capacity is needed. This kind of operational practices and pilot projects are already implemented in Italy, Terna, and France, RTE in the TSOs, and we might hear more from our next speakers from Terna about these practices, so I will not explain too much on that. Next slide, please. We look then for battery solution. We have batteries, we have new business models in place, we need new market design and new ways to operate the system. And we look at different solutions that have been implemented around the world, and we see that the impact is really big. Here are some big numbers from actual projects implemented in different countries, but we can see that it helped increase a lot the capacity installed in variable renewable energy. It helped with transmission congestion reduction. It helped with reduction on frequency cost services and many other benefits for implementing these solutions. Next slide, please. Finally, one of my last slides is putting together all these innovations I presented today are part of innovation toolbox that includes 30 key innovation for wind and solar PV integration. All these are included in our innovation landscape report for flexible power system, renewable powered system, and they're available online for everyone here. It's the list of the 30 innovations. Next slide. I also left here for you the links. Next slide, please. Yes, the links of the report. And for each of these 30 innovation, we have also developed a small brief that you can also find online with more details about each of the innovation and how it can help increase flexibility in the system. On next slide, you see, the 30 briefs and the ones that I mentioned today in this presentation are a bit enlarged, but please feel free to refer to these documents for more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Linda, and for very clearly explain the different innovations, not only in technology, but also market regulation, system operation, and business models they need to create needed scale for energy storage technologies to be deployed worldwide. Thank you so much for that. And now let's move to our next expert, Mr. Paulo Malone, who will be presenting the latest trends on cost and performance for energy storage technologies. Paulo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the cost of electricity storage, and maybe we can go through the first slide. Just to recap, so it has been mentioned by some of my colleagues, but the drivers of storage, not to forget the off-grid sector, so about 733 million people still without electricity, somewhat an improvement from previous number, which was 1.2 billion. Then looking forward, of course, high shares of variable renewable energy, we're looking at 73% in the scenario that Arena is analyzing. By 2050, around 8,000 gigawatts of wind, 14,000 gigawatts of PV, so that's quite a lot of variable renewables. And then, as mentioned by Irina, also electromobility. So those 50 terawatt hours will come from around 1,780 million electric vehicles. So this has pushed the development of the technology quite ahead, and we can go to next. But at the same time, this has been pushed by the increased competitiveness of renewables. You can see here in the screen how steeply the cost has declined, for example, for PV. We can see there an 88% cost decline. This is in terms, what you see here is the LCOE of these three technologies. It's from 2010 to 2021. So you see costs in 2021, this is preliminary data before we will soon publish the 2021 data. So it's $0.048 US per kilowatt hour for PV in 2021. And similarly for offshore and onshore, declines of 60 and 68% have occurred. So this has opened up more opportunities for electricity storage as renewables have declining cost. Next, please. Now, increasingly, electricity from renewable energy is much more competitive compared to fossil fuel alternatives. Here you can see on the left-hand side in green the cost of onshore PV and offshore in Europe in terms of the LCOE compared to fossil plants based on gas, so CCGT, with and without carbon capture and storage. And well, in general terms, we can say that as the share of renewables will grow, the fossil fuel fired power plants will have an increasingly difficult economical case compared to renewables. So this will only increase the economics of electricity storage. We go to next. Emanuele was mentioning a little bit about PV and storage, so coupled PV and storage systems and plants. So they have been increasingly tremendously in their presence in recent years. Here we can see a little bit of a flavor of that. So what you can see here is the levelized PPA price. So it's the PPA somewhat normalized to assemble more at the actual LCOE. So for example, for the US, which you say here in sort of light blue or green, So you can see also on the horizontal axis the actual duration, storage duration. So you can see that all these batteries have a storage duration from around 0 to almost 5, 4 to 5, right? Uh, for such systems, or 4 hours, for example, you could get a cost of between 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and even less if less duration is required. Now, comparatively, here depicted in red is a CSP project in the UAE of 700 megawatts, which I think it has around 15 hours of storage duration. So this is based on thermal thermal storage with molten salt that Arina was mentioning about thermal storage, and still this type of thermal storage is the currently economic way to provide long duration storage. But this might change if the cost of batteries continue to decline. We can go to next. We've done a previous analysis looking at all electricity storage technologies in detail in the past, or you can look it up. It's called Electricity Storage and Renewables. You can look it up to look at more details of this, but maybe importantly, of course, we look at all the different chemical technologies, and some of them now in recent years, because lithium has heavily dominated the technology aspects, we kind of tend to forget a little bit about the other technologies, but they're quite important, particularly in terms of the market evolving towards higher duration of storage. So this is not to be discounted. We can go to next. This is based mostly on stationary applications. So you can see here in 2016, there was a cost of between 150 to 1,050 US dollars per kilowatt hour, and now expected to decline to around 75 to 480, so much narrower range depending for all these technologies by 2030. This is still kind of like a trajectory that seems feasible, even now a bit, it could be even more optimistic. So, but still, you can go to next, please. Oh, next. And at the same time as the installation cost, or let's say the capex of these stationary electricity storage systems have declined, the performance values have increased. So here you can see the cycle life of the technology. This keeps on improving. This opens up more applications for electricity storage systems beyond the current ones. And this is quite interesting. Let's go to next. Regarding behind the meter batteries, I think Arina mentioned a little bit about that, so we can just skip this one. To look a little bit about the cost of behind the meter batteries, this has been driven by lots of improvements in the cell design in recent years. So it's a 98% cost decline for the cell price from 1991 to 2018. Now, when you look at the home systems, particularly in Germany and California, where most of the data can be obtained, 71% cost decline from 14 to 20 in Germany, 33% in California. So quite steep decline for German systems. Let's go to next. But not only costs are important, but also performance. So you see the energy density of the cells has increased 239% in 1991 to 2018. This is in turn what has opened up more, the evolution of the cell energy density has opened up the mobility sector, actually, has pushed this development as well. And then the storage capacity in terms of kilowatts has increased as well in Germany and California. The duration has increased 100%. This is in terms of the hours of storage duration that can be applicable. And the round trip efficiency in Germany also keeps on increasing from 94 in 2018 to 96 currently. So this keeps on improving the economics of storage. We can go to next, please. Long term, you can see here some numbers for Germany, and now recently we started to track numbers for UK, Italy, and Australia and France to try to come up with where the markets are increasingly growing. So UK and Australia even more competitive than Germany, whereas Italy and France a little bit on the higher end there. We can go to next. Like I mentioned, the storage duration has improved as well as the capacities. And then just a flavor of how the range of efficiency is in 2021 is from almost 95 to 98, right? So costs have declined, performance continues to improve, and this will open up much more opportunities for storage to participate in different markets within the electricity sector, and to enable it to expand electricity uses beyond the electricity sector. I think that you can go to next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Amazing to see these trends in cost decline, also expanded duration and performance models, particularly to electromobility, also stationary battery technology. So thank you so much for that, Paulo. And with that, I would like to move to our next expert. Now we will have Dr. Rahul Balkar, who is the president of the India Energy Storage Alliance, and he will now present to us the perspective from India on the use and application of this energy storage technology. Mr. Balkar, please, the floor is yours.
It's an honor and pleasure to participate in the G20 webinar series talking about accelerating green hydrogen and energy storage technologies for energy transition. I'm Dr. Rahul Walawalkar, President of India Energy Storage Alliance, and I'll be sharing my insights related to energy storage deployments in India. Is someone able to share my presentation, or should I share it from my screen? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So can you go to the next slide? So India Energy Storage Alliance was created in 2012 to create awareness about advanced energy storage and e-mobility technologies in India. And over last 10 years, IESA has grown as a premier alliance supporting more than 160 member companies as well as more than 30 global partnerships. And we have set a vision to make India a global hub for R&D, manufacturing, as well as adoption of advanced energy storage and EV technologies. Next slide, please. When we look at India's growing energy needs, India already has almost more than $160 billion energy imports, and it is growing. And it is expected that in next 15 years, this could almost double. Now, this includes import of crude oil, natural gas, coal, as well as other petroleum products, and need for ammonia for fertilizers. Next slide, please. Right now, many times when we talk about renewables, we end up talking about only the electricity sector. But for India, one of the challenges right now is that the share of electricity as part of the primary energy usage for India is only around 17%. Whereas India has a tremendous potential for growth of renewable energy. So one of the areas where the policymakers in India and alliances like IESA are looking at green hydrogen as a perfect complement for renewables and energy storage, where we can start increasing the share of electricity as part of the overall energy mix. Next slide, please. So India is looking at green hydrogen as one of the key areas, and there are next slide, please. I'm still seeing the same slide. Yeah. So there are already many key applications where Indian industries are using hydrogen, which is a gray hydrogen through steam methane reformer process, mainly for petroleum refining, fertilizer. and that requirement itself is currently more than 6 million metric tons annually. And currently, through the work being done on green hydrogen policies in India, there is a blending policy which is being proposed, which can immediately create opportunity for green hydrogen in India. And the share of the blended green hydrogen can keep on increasing from maybe 5% to 25% over next 5 years, and continue to increase as the prices for green hydrogen comes down. And that is going to create tremendous opportunity for expanding the role of RE. Next slide, please. So considering the role what India is playing in the renewable adoption and the geographic advantage India has, particularly for solar energy, already in last 7-8 years, India has done tremendous improvement where India has already reached around 150 gigawatt of renewable deployment, and it is expected to continue. And Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji had set a target for 450 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel energy generation by 2030, out of which almost 400 gigawatt is expected to be between grid-scale solar, wind, and rooftop photovoltaic. Next slide, please. The policy scenario in India has been evolving steadily. As a democracy, obviously takes some significant amount of time for implementing policies. In India, the electricity sector is a dual jurisdiction, so both central government as well as state governments play a key role. There are many key bodies, including Ministry of Power, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Niti Aayog, as well as statutory bodies like Central Electricity Regulatory Commission and CEA have played a key role. And since 2016, many states, including Karnataka, Telangana, Gujarat, Maharashtra, have also started playing key role both for stationary storage as well as for e-mobility policies. Next slide, please. So ISA earlier last month has released a vision document for India, where for grid scale energy storage, we have set a target for 160 gigawatt hour by 2030. And of this, you can see that more than 60% is expected to be driven by the ambitious renewable energy target what India had set up. And then the rest of it will be divided between commercial industrial applications, the DISCOM side or the utility side deployment on the distribution feeder, as well as ancillary services and transmission and distribution different. Next slide. But apart from the grid side requirement, we also expect there is a significant potential for energy storage deployment on the residential and small commercial customers as well. So overall, in fact, depending on the scenario, we expect India would have somewhere around 250 to 350 gigawatt hour of stationary energy storage. And even the e-mobility has started picking up in India, where we expect that by 2027, the total demand for batteries for EVs is going to be somewhere between 150 to 300 gigawatt hour, of which almost 1/3 requirement will come from electric three-wheelers, 1/3 will come from electric two-wheelers, and rest will get divided between four-wheelers and commercial vehicles like buses. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned already, there are many key stakeholders who are playing a key role in creating policies related to energy storage deployment. Ministry of New and Renewable Energy took the lead starting 2013, working with both Central Electricity Agency as well as Electricity Regulatory Commission. But particularly in last couple of years, Ministry of Power itself has started playing a key role in this. And then there are various transmission operators as well as state regulatory agencies are also playing a key role in advancing energy storage in India. Next slide, please. So to support the industry, ISA has launched many initiatives over the years, and these includes creating awareness with commercial industrial customers through settings like ESS Meet for making them aware about role of renewables plus storage for meeting their power quality and reliability requirement, to launching initiatives like EV Adopter Circle for accelerating the EV adoption for commercial and industrial users, to launching initiatives like Micro for focusing on energy access and looking at how RE plus storage and microgrids can actually enable economic development for remote areas. And many of these learnings can actually be spread beyond India. And we would love to collaborate with IRENA as well as the G20 countries for exploring such opportunities. Next slide, please. Now, one of the key things is that India has also now set up an ambitious target for setting up manufacturing, and Prime Minister Modi ji has announced the production link incentive scheme, where there is a specific scheme for advanced battery chemistry gigafactories for 50 gigawatt hour. Next slide. Already earlier this year in March, 4 companies have been selected for setting up the initial 50 gigawatt hour of manufacturing. But as IESA, we have already set a vision on last year at World Energy Storage Day, which is 22nd September, to double from the initial target of 50 gigawatt hour by 2027 to 100 gigawatt hour by 2030 and continue to build it to 500 gigawatt hour by 2035. Next slide. So again, if you need to know more information about this, there are many reports available similar to the IRENA reports, which are specifically targeting about the energy storage applications and markets in India. We have also done various technology status reports, as well as we have done various white papers and knowledge papers for awareness creation, as well as we have our own magazine, Emerging Technology News, and a podcast which is available freely online. So please take benefit of these things, and I hope together we are not going to make just the India global hub, but India can play a key role in partnership with IRENA and other G20 countries in accelerating the adoption of renewable energies, green hydrogen, and energy storage technologies around the globe. So once again, I would like to thank IRENA team for inviting us for sharing this, and I hope all of you will join us on 22nd September for the World Energy Storage Day global event, where you can, it's a 24-hour marathon event for sharing insights from around the globe. So once again, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions during the panel discussion. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malavalkar. Excellent overview and very comprehensive overview of all the efforts done in India to promote energy storage, but also the synergies with the whole energy sector and other technologies and energy carriers. Also how to engage the different stakeholders, the importance of this dialogue and engagement. So many, many thanks for that insightful presentation. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the next expert from Terna, the transmission system operator of Italy, Mr. Guido Gaida, Director of International Affairs of Terna. Mr. Guida, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, first of all, for this invitation to participate in this very interesting panel. And as Terna representative, so Terna is the transmission system operator. My intervention have a very few slides. Will be has a reference the European Union context. Please, next slide. I hope you hear. Okay, thank you. And as you can see here, so referring to the EU context, you know that the European Union has the target to reach the net zero emission by 2050 and setting a very strong target by 2030. Target that have been also increased recently by the European Union with the publication of the REPowerEU package on the 18th of May. It's a package in which the Commission would like to intervene for reducing the price of electricity and gas, and for the benefit of a consumer. So in the left side of this, left part of this slide, you can see a graph in which you see what is the needs in terms of flexibility for balancing and congestion management. And is very, very clear that your needs is referred to the short-term flexibility, for which the needs is more related to the daily needs. Daily and weekly. So this means that the reason will require fast integration of sustainable resources. So these resources, and in particular, I'm referring to adequate level of storage capacity, will be used to reduce the over generation, as illustrated very clearly by Emanuele Tahibi at the beginning, and also to be able to cover the residual ramp during the afternoon. So it's really from this slide, have an adequate level of storage capacity is very, very important in order to integrate higher value of available energy resources, especially these for short-term duration flexibility services. Next slide, please. Here you can see always in the left side a graph I took from the ACER assessment on the EU wholesale electricity market design, recently published. ACER is the agency of the European regulators, in which you can see what are the resources that are suitable to cover the flexibility needs. And it's very clear from this slide that not all flexibility sources are suitable to cover these flexibility needs. So it's clear that the hydrogen is able to, is useful for seasonal ones, but other electrical storage systems like batteries and pumped hydro are the most efficient one to cover the short flexibility needs for in the short term, so days and weekly period. Next slide, please. As shown also by the colleagues who identified the trend of costs for this kind of generation, I think that it's really important for development of this storage system is very important the regulatory framework. At European level, the Commission approved in 2019 the Electricity Directive, in which some rules have been identified, some guidelines have been identified for an adequate development of storage capacity, and this has been reinforced with the REPowerEU publication on the 18th of May. So it's very clear in the REPowerEU that there is a possibility to support investment in renewables through the structural use of a capacity mechanism, but also to encourage the use of demand response and storage through European funds with the introduction, in this case, and adoption of a new network code. So I would like to say that it's very important that the regulatory, despite the regulatory background, there are very few instruments that allow to support investment in electrical storage, taking into account that this kind of generation is very capital intensive. So if I can conclude, I would like to say that green hydrogen is really useful for seasonal flexibility, but what is really important in the short-term period is to work on the existing mature technology, and I'm referring in this case to hydrogen storage batteries that will be needed as early as 2030, and for which we are already lagging behind. So having for this kind of mechanism an adequate system that is able to support in long-term period development is really, really important. So thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guida, and thank you also very much for a very concise but interesting presentation, also from a perspective of the transmission system operator, which is a regulated entity, and how actually certain adjustment to regulatory framework were crucial in order to Terna to be able to benefit from this innovative technology. This is really amazing. Well, unfortunately, we are running a little bit short of time, but I really would like to ask at least a couple of questions. I would like to maybe start with you, Mr. Gira, as I have you on the screen now. And as you mentioned, Terna is actually a front runner in, for example, piloting this application of utility scale assets connected to the transmission grid in the form of what some people call the virtual power lines. This regulatory adjustment of the EU framework has been crucial. From your perspective of from Terna, Mr. Vida, do you think that this approach of TSOs owning energy storage assets and making these regulatory changes is something that can really benefit the system operator, not only from a, let's say, system reliability perspective, but also from a value perspective, and it's something that other G20 countries and other countries in general should replicate? Or is there anything else that you think that still needs to be adjusted and improved for TSOs to really make the best value and benefit from these technologies?
No, yes, you are right. So having this kind of technology is very, very important for us. It's very valuable. And in particular, we are working among the TSOs to support this kind of investment because we think that really with this huge increase of renewable, so with the increase of penetration of photovoltaic and wind generation, you for sure need something that is able to manage the system, and the storage is something that is needed. As I said, we are talking about capital-intensive investments, and if I refer to Italy, till now, since the liberalization, no new storage system have been built, with exception of some batteries. Has been, in particular, some of them have been assigned with the capacity market performed at the end of the past year. So it's very important to be able to have and to have an instrument that are able to support and in the long term the private investor in building this kind of generation. I think this is very important. If I may complement, I think that it is important to mention the distributed storage. So it's something that also Terna is working together with other grid operators. I'm referring in particular to the support that comes from electrical vehicle and domestic batteries. Together, Terna, together with the German, Netherlands, Swiss, and Austrian TSOs, but this project is open also to the distributors, has developed the so-called company, the name is Equigi. Equigi is a blockchain crowd balancing platform that ensure reliable data exchange to enable aggregators to participate in the services and the market services with small scale flexibility resources, such as in this case batteries, household batteries, and electrical vehicles, turning in this way consumers into prosumers. So we are working together. So our main goal with the other TSOs, our main goal is to be able to have a standard to be able to have also this kind of support, has been mentioned by the previous speaker. And as system operator, we think that the contribution, distributed resources, is really, really important.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vida. Excellent point on how distributed energy resources are now also becoming a provider of flexibility services through this digitalization and new business models as aggregators. And that also is changing the role of the distribution system operator, retailers, transmission system operator. So it's a very exciting and dynamic situation that we are experiencing today.
Yeah,
Many
I
thanks.
would like here to specify that we are not referring on only transmission operator, system operator, but grid operators. So it's open also to distributors. This project started one year ago. We are now ready also to have in our project also other participants. So we are ready to have them in our project. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. Excellent, Mr. Gira. As I mentioned, the role not only of TSOs, but DSOs, it's also changing and the interaction and how they provide services to each other. Thank you very much, Mr. Gira. And I think we have time only for one more question. I would like to ask you, Mr. Balabalkar, from the India perspective, we know that within India, different also provinces have different regulatory frameworks for the energy sector. From your perspective, which are the more progressive and dynamic regulatory frameworks within India to promote the hybridization of renewable systems with energy storage systems that can be maybe again be replicated across the whole country and even in other big emerging countries?
So this is a very important question. And in India, being sort of electricity being a dual jurisdiction, the central government plays a key role in setting up the vision. But ultimately, the state governments also have to play a key role in making sure that regulatory frameworks are also applied at the state level. So we do think that there is still some more work in front of us to make sure that we can ensure this collaboration. But the good part is that earlier this year, the Ministry of Power has gone ahead and released their guidelines on how to integrate energy storage, how you can look at energy storage as part of both generation as well as transmission or distribution side based on the role and application what it is playing. And there is also, if the vision document what is set up by IESA, that is accepted by Ministry of Power, then we hope that that will also lay out a very clear roadmap for systematic procurement. Because one of the challenge what industry has faced in India is that everyone is aware about the long-term vision and long-term need for storage, but the systematic deployment and the learning and capability building which is required to scale to hundreds of gigawatt hour scale deployment, that has been lacking for last 4 or 5 years. And we hope that now with Ministry of Power and MNRE taking lead on this area, we will be able to fix that. There are many existing things, like for example, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission has earlier this year come up with guidelines which allows energy storage to play a part in ancillary services. But there is also still some little bit more improvement required, because the current guidelines which are released by Central Electricity Regulatory Commission do not incentivize the fast response which energy storage technologies can provide. So there is still some work which is required, and we are in regular discussion with CERC. We are part of the Central Advisory Committee for CERC, but we are really excited about the potential. But in terms of the regulatory frameworks, we still have little bit more work to do before we can see mass scale deployments in India.
Thank you, Mr. Manavalkar. Clear example on the importance of having a central government also capturing all these practices, and also how dynamic and fast these regulations may need to be adapted. No? The services like fast frequency response are already being tested, and to make the business case, it would be great to have as soon as possible that integrated in an appropriate regulatory framework, but of course that requires time, dialogue, etc. But great insights, and I would like with that thank to all our distinguished experts who participated in this session. Unfortunately, we have one short of time, so I cannot ask questions to the other IRENA colleagues. But thank you so much for your attention, and then back to you, Claudia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boschel, as our moderator, and also to our speakers, Mr. Emmanuel Taibi, Ms. Arina, Mr. Pablo, Mr. Rahul, and Mr. Guido. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished participants, let us move on to our next agenda, the talk show with our next panel, with the topic of hydrogen to support the operation of a decarbonized power systems. We will start this session with a presentation from Irina and followed by discussion with our panelists from PT Pertamina Persero, European Commission, PT PLN Persero, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The discussion will be moderated by Dr. Oka Arjasa from Advanced Material Research Center, National Research and Innovation Agency, Indonesia. Dr. Oka, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Oka Jasa. I'm a researcher, and I will be your moderator for this session. Welcome to hydrogen session. Global warming, net zero emission, energy transition, renewable energy, hydrogen economy. These are more or less the key words that come to my mind when I read about the title of this session. Later on, we have 4 panelists that will help us understand more on this issue. Before that, I would like to invite Mr. Emanuele Bianco, Program Officer Policy IRENA, who will be speaking to us on pillars for green hydrogen policy making. Emanuele, whenever you're ready, please.
Hello, thank you. Thank you and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emanuele Bianco and I am a program officer in IRENA. We are since 3 years analyzing policy making in the green hydrogen sector, and today I'm going to introduce the pillars for green hydrogen policy making, meaning those basic instruments, those basic measures that we believe are necessary to actually kickstart these sectors and moving it from niche to mainstream. So if I can see my slides. I don't see the slides, but then I can continue the presentation. Okay, thank you. Let's start with the beginning. Green hydrogen is a topic that has become very, very common to discuss about and to talk about, but it's not a new thing. In 2020, we consumed 87 megatons of hydrogen, and mostly in refineries, ammonia and methanol production. And if we look at the past, most of the policies were instead focusing on the transport sector. But this is changing. So if we can go to the next slide, please. There is a new wave of hydrogen policy interest. And this is related to the fact that we can now use green hydrogen in more sectors. There's a focus on using green hydrogen in the steelmaking, the petrochemical sector, thanks to the fact that we have technological maturity and decreasing variable renewable energy cost and the commitment to net zero. So the interest for hydrogen has moved from the transport sector to the industrial sectors, the maritime shipping and aviation. And also, as you can see, the interest for the topic has grown over time also in the general public, as you can see in the research volumes on Google. Next slide, please. And therefore, we have to understand what are the main policies, the main measures to support green hydrogen. And we identified 4 policy pillars, 4 main policies that should be adopted in order to actually make possible for hydrogen to operate, even if it's not yet cheap as necessary now. And the first one is adopting a national hydrogen strategy. And we are actually seeing this happening around the world. We have now around 45 hydrogen strategies being published or being drafted around the world, in particular in Europe, Latin America, and the GCC and the MENA region. There is still a lot to be done, and I would like to remember that once a hydrogen strategy has been drafted, it's not the final element for planning. A strategy is a living document that can be redrafted and can be updated given the technological development of hydrogen and the new policy objectives, being that decarbonization, energy security, technological independences, and so on and so forth. But within a hydrogen strategy, there is one element that should be remembered, is where to invest for the hydrogen consumption. So next slide, please. This is actually the second policy pillar, policy priorities. Hydrogen can be consumed in almost the entire energy sector, but there are few places, few sectors where it makes more sense. And here we present a way to identify policy priorities. On the y-axis, you can see the maturity of the hydrogen solution compared to the other decarbonization solution. And on the x-axis, you can see how much centralized is a solution, a hydrogen consumption compared to the rest. So the elements on the right and on the top are the ones that have higher priority compared to the rest. And you can see here, basically, we divided in two areas, hydrogen and electrification. And these areas under the hydrogen area are the areas where green hydrogen makes more sense. And so we see chemical and refineries, stealing, shipping, and seasonal storage that was mentioned before, while other solutions like residential heating or short-term storage that also was mentioned before these other solutions have more sense to be electrified directly. Next slide, please. Because there is also another reason. To produce hydrogen, we need electricity. And we can use this electricity to produce one services or to produce hydrogen to then produce the service. But the amount of electricity would increase in the
I apologize for the technical issue. While we're waiting for Mr. Emmanuel Bianco to back online, now let's move on to the panelist discussion, shall we? We have 4 panelists, and first, I would like to invite Mr. Andianto Hidayat, VP Downstream Research and Technology Innovation, PT Pertamina Persero.
Halo, Pak.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you. Morning and good afternoon to all participants of this webinar.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Ruud Kampeneer. I hope that I'm spelling correctly. DG ENER, European Commission.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And next, I will invite Mr. Zainal Arifin, EVP Engineering and Technology, PT PLN Persero.
Yeah, good morning and good afternoon, everyone.
Yes. And last but not least, I would like to invite Ms. Kumi Kitamori, Deputy Director of the OECD Environment Directorate.
Hello, good afternoon. Selamat siang. Happy to be here, to be participating in this panel today.
Thank you. Now, I would like to go to ladies first, Ms. Kumi Kitamori. How are you, Kumi Kitamori? Can I call you Kumi? All right. Can you tell us briefly about the OECD and how it's related to hydrogen or renewable energy, please? Oh yeah, the sound, we cannot hear the sound. It could be muted or?
Yeah, okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, I can hear it clearly.
Okay. Yes, so thank you for having the OECD in this panel today. So at the OECD, in terms of hydrogen, we have a specific program targeted at emerging economies to support governments to develop policy approaches and strategies to identify viable business models and financing strategy. We heard that it's still very costly, but there's a need to push the wider deployment and mainstream, as the keynote presenter said, mainstreaming of hydrogen use in wider different applications. So we are currently working with, for example, the government of India to help them develop a clean energy finance and investment roadmap. And it is really to come up with recommendations on financing mechanism to scale up the investment in green hydrogen. And we are also working with other countries in the emerging region beyond just the OECD member countries.
Thank you, Kumi. Into the next question. What are the opportunities across the green hydrogen value chains in view of national circumstances, challenges, and bottlenecks in developing green hydrogen market?
Is it addressed to myself?
Yes, it's still on you, Ms. Kumi.
All right, great. Yes, thank you. So as we heard already in earlier sessions, there's a lot of opportunities and potentials in different areas of application, including transport, building sector, and then steel and iron and other energy-intensive heavy industry. So to reap the many opportunities of green hydrogen, we have to remember that specificity, green hydrogen, because we want all this to contribute to net zero target globally. It's important to understand the complexity of the hydrogen value chain and adapt to specific circumstances. And each country will, of course, have different national circumstances. And in terms of possible barriers, potential barriers may be related to more upstream resource issues, such as water stress, that can limit the opportunity to implement local green hydrogen production. And if you look at the midstream part of the value chain, for example, lack of storage and transport infrastructure, for hydrogen may be a major bottleneck. And if you also look at the main challenges for first projects to come on stream and then to really take off, lack of demand due to the cost differential compared to the more conventional fossil fuel solutions is a major obstacle that needs to be addressed. And especially in emerging and developing countries, we need to identify the most promising use for the specific national circumstances, as I said. For example, in countries where the industrial base may be still immature, transport may be a first sector application to focus. In countries where we have island grids, repowering may be a priority. And in countries where there's significant industrial development and heavy industry, of course, industry customers could be a potential priority target sector, for example.
Thank you very much, Kimi. Now, I would like to address the next question to Mr. Zainal Arifin. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
What are Indonesia's plans in terms of hydrogen development, especially for power generation, and what challenge that you foresee?
Okay, actually as utility company, we are focusing for utilizing green hydrogen for power generation. We have, the huge potential that hydrogen can potentially replace the fuel of fossil fuel. The capacity can be replaced is huge, about 16.3 gigawatt, consists of two fuel. The first is fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell to replace the diesel engine. So we now still operate more than 5,000 unit engine using the diesel fuel oil with the total capacity more than 2 gigawatt. So if we successfully replace the diesel station with green hydrogen, we can reduce the consumption until 3.1 million ton a year for this diesel. And another is co-firing hydrogen for the gas turbine or gas engine. Yeah. We now has the gas fire to 322 unit with the capacity more than 14 gigawatt. And if we can replace the gas with hydrogen, we can reduce the gas consumption up to 1,100 MMBTU a year. This is the potential we have, and we still look at how we make it, how we do, who can realize this technology. But however, there is still challenging issue, for utilizing green hydrogen for power generation, especially in Indonesia. The first is about the availability of renewable energy power itself is still low. And in Indonesia right now, the total capacity of renewable resources only 8.2 gigawatt. It's about only 12.74% of fuel mix. Different with other countries like Europe, Indonesia, we have no oversupply from the renewable energy. And also we should notice that not all renewable energy is feasible to convert to hydrogen. Some of them is more efficient if used directly to produce electricity. This is the number one issue. The second one is about technological issue. We know that hydrogen is a promising technology, have lots of potential, but has a very low density of energy. It is hard and expensive to store and move around. We still struggle right now, I think, to how to effectively store and transport the hydrogen. This is the second thing. The number three is about economical issue. This is the most important thing here. Today, making hydrogen for renewable energy is still expensive in Indonesia. So if we would like to replace the gas fuel, by hydrogen, the price of hydrogen should be less than $1 per kilogram. Right now in Indonesia, the hydrogen production cost is still expensive, between $6 until $10 per kilogram. That's the important thing, also the economical thing. And the last one, I think about the hydrogen infrastructure in Indonesia. I think it's not exist yet. I think if that's our plan, then this is what we face right now, the challenging issue to utilizing green hydrogen for power generation in Indonesia.
Thank you. Now, for the next question, Mr. Andianto Hidayat, can you hear me? Okay. What are the opportunity for using green hydrogen other than for hydrogen re-electrification, such as for transportation and industry? And how do you see Pertamina role in this?
Okay, Dr. Roka and all participants. I think green hydrogen has a big opportunities for the industry. Looking at the existing hydrogen value chain, we see that many industries like oil and gas refineries, petrochemicals, fertilizers are currently good customer of hydrogens, but unfortunately, they are still supplied with the gray hydrogen. Yeah? It is responsible for the large GHG emission. So if we want to move forward to reach net zero emission somehow, we should find ways to substitute this gray hydrogen with the cleaner and lower carbon hydrogens, such as blue or green. Yeah? With that spirit in mind, Pertamina Group, through our subsidiary, the Pertamina Geothermal Energy, is currently developing a green hydrogen plant. It's a pilot plant of 100 kilograms per day capacity, where the part of the products is supposed to be utilized by internal refineries for petrochemical production purpose. Meanwhile, in the transportation sectors, indeed, we saw some progress in utilizing hydrogen and its derivatives as a cleaner fuel. Yeah, whether it's using the fuel cell technology or internal combustion technology. However, I think the use of this green hydrogen could be more appropriate for heavy-duty vehicles that has a larger volume of consume. That is currently still the challenge for the battery. So if we are supposed to convert the current heavy-duty vehicles to hydrogens, that will be a potential market. We have started research and collaborations with academia and another SOE, the Indonesian railway manufacturing industry, INCA, to develop a 1 kilowatt prototype for the first stage to hydrogenize the in railway applications for fuel cell. Oh. So this is still under this early stage, and we are confident that we can use this green hydrogen for industrial application as well as the transportations other than the those that can be supported by the battery technology.
Thank you, Mr. Andianto, for that. Next, I would like to ask Ruth Campanier. Ruth, are you there? Okay.
I'm indeed.
All right. What will be the driver for a widespread of hydrogen economy, and how emerging countries could benefit from this? Can you share your thought on this? Thank you.
Yes, of course. The European Commission published a new energy transition plan, essentially, in July 2021, where essentially climate neutrality is the main driver. So we have put in place targets which allow us to get to a carbon neutral economy in 2050. And in order to do so, we need to make sure that the investment decisions which are taking place this decade, and then I'm mainly talking about long-term investment decisions made in industry, and for example, the heavy-duty transport sector, which was mentioned previously, new airplanes, new large ships, etc., that those investment decisions are compatible with this carbon neutral future. So that's indeed why we have put in place dedicated targets for the uptake of renewable hydrogen in the industry and in the transport sector. Because by making those targets towards the industry, we make sure that the hydrogen is available there. Now, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine has added an additional driver for the uptake of hydrogen in Europe, because we are looking at ways to replace the import of natural gas, which we've been relying upon from Russia in the last decades and even longer. So that's the second driver for hydrogen. And with that, we're looking essentially at two opportunities. We're of course looking to expand the production of renewable hydrogen production in Europe, but that of course requires much more renewable power as well. But we're also putting in place a dedicated ambition of importing 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen in 2030. And again, there's not only, I think, opportunities to work together with developing countries to see if we can take advantage of cheap and large-scale renewable resources, which are currently untapped. So how can we tap into those resources? But also, coming back to your previous question on how to develop these hydrogen supply chains. Because we shouldn't forget that the hydrogen market, especially the green hydrogen market, is still in its nascent phase. And Europe itself needs to develop such a hydrogen ecosystem, indeed requiring a lot of investments and new developments into not only the production of the renewable electricity, but also the electrolyzers, the scale of the electrolyzers, going from the tens to the hundreds of megawatts and even into the gigawatts. We're looking at how can we develop new or repurpose existing gas infrastructure to transport that hydrogen, as well as the storage facilities and the dispatch at the end of the day, which we need to get it to the end consumer.
Right. Tell us a little bit briefly about your institution, DGENER, European Commission, and maybe related to renewable energies and hydrogen.
Yes, indeed. So what the European Commission does, and especially the DG ENER, so it's the Directorate General for Energy, is that you can essentially compare it to kind of a European Ministry for Energy. And what we try to do, especially in the area of renewable energy, is to set common rules for all 27 European member states. And this is what we also do for hydrogen. So we set, for example, now, and we are discussing this with the member states, and we have also a European Parliament, rules on what counts as renewable hydrogen. So when can a producer say, I have actually produced renewable hydrogen? And we do this, for example, through the developments of what is called delegated acts, where we set out potential kind of legislative criteria for the production of renewable hydrogen. The second way how we work is that we indeed work and kind of negotiate with the member states to set targets for the uptake of renewable hydrogen in industry and transport sector. And so one of the things which we're negotiating right now at the moment is that we would like that each member state makes sure that of all the hydrogen which is currently consumed in industry, and that is 96% gray hydrogen or hydrogen based on fossil fuels, that 50% of that comes from at least renewable energy sources. And the third thing which we're working on is, for example, to ensure that we have certification for renewable hydrogen. So that both within the EU, but also hydrogen producers from outside of the EU can actually deliver that hydrogen to the EU, and you have one coherent certification framework, which then would allow for both European and global trade.
Right, thank you, Ruth. That's back to Kumi Kitamori. Hi, Kumi. Could you please, could you please share some of the international example of business models from the public and private sector about how green hydrogen is becoming successful?
Yes, in many cases, successful cases are really cooperation between public and private, government and private investors, because the key challenge is really the financial barrier, as I mentioned earlier. So financial mechanisms such as the viability gap fund, whereby public funds necessary to render the first project financially viable, it's one approach. Another area where governments can help in this area is green public procurement, in effect creating demand as the government being the major customer to realize such big, large-scale projects. For example, if you take some initiatives as example, Clean Energy Ministerial Industrial Decarbonization Initiative, they are trying to encourage coming up with at least 10 governments to make public procurement commitments for low carbon steel and cement. So this is the kind of initiatives that can help to create demand. For another example, if you maybe go back to the example of India, the Ministry of Power just released a green hydrogen and green ammonia policy this year in February. And this significantly improves the cost of green hydrogen production by waiving this interstate power transmission charges and giving priority access to renewable energy for this application. Another example, maybe we can talk about South Africa. Their Hydrogen Society roadmap identified 9 pilot projects to build a hydrogen valley. Basically, it's a bit of a cluster approach to share infrastructure investment, and this helps to accelerate the economies of scale and also to ramp up local supply chain. Another example, maybe let's move to South America. Colombia, they issued their hydrogen roadmap in 2021, and then they announced that it would prepare a system of guarantee of origin and certification, as we heard from our European Union colleague, for low carbon hydrogen. So these are some of the examples of the way in which governments can help. And then again, the financing, I repeat, is the key challenge, and because the scale of the investment needed is so large that we have to be really looking at public, private, domestic, and international sources to mobilize and unlock private financing. And in this area, the blending of public money and private money is really the key. So another approach that we are taking when the OECD program to support emerging economies with hydrogen technology mainstreaming is to really advise on how to do this blended finance approach so that the risk in upfront investment can be shared between the government and private investors. And we do this by consulting with different ministries in a given country and then develop such approach together in a very country-tailored way. As I said, mentioned, each country has very different national circumstances.
Thank you, Kumi. Mr. Zainal Arifin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will hydrogen re-electrification, it means hydrogen production, storage, and its use in power generation, have a role in 100% renewable energy systems? Are the technology available to convert hydrogen into power mature and commercially available? This for, I think, for Indonesia case.
Yeah, of course, hydrogen will have a significant role to achieve 100% renewable energy in Indonesia because different with other storage technology, actually hydrogen has more advantages. Not only for the storage technology can mitigate the effect of VRE, wind turbine, and PV solar, the effect to VRE to the grid, but also hydrogen is energy carrier that able to transport a huge energy with the long time duration, yeah, long time storage duration. If we talk about the technology, actually, fuel cell is already mature because right now the largest fuel cell power already operated in Isubu and Sion, Korea. The capacity is 78 megawatt. So another project, smaller capacity on construction in Guyana, France. So fuel cell, I say that will be a solution, and the technology is already mature, but not feasible economically in Indonesia. And how about the hydrogen co-firing? Actually, right now, to producing 100 gas turbine, I can utilize 100% hydrogen is not big issue. In 20s, 1980s actually, there is already gas turbine which able to utilize 100% hydrogen, but in small capacity between 25 until 50 megawatt. So right now, some manufacturer like GE, Siemens, Mitsubishi, I think highly compete and racing, to achieve the first gas turbine can utilize 100% hydrogen. Technically, maybe for the hydrogen gas turbine co-firing, we still need maybe next 5 years until the technology is mature. So yes, hydrogen will be have significant role to help Indonesia to achieve 100% renewable energy.
Thank you, Mr. Zainal Arifin. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Adianto Hidayat as representative of Pertamina. Pertamina is looking to invest about 11 billion US dollar to help accelerate its clean energy transition, including hydrogen developments. Now, could you please elaborate on what specific project that actually you are targeting?
Okay, yeah, Dr. Oka. So being energy company, we are really focusing on how to generate, how to store it, and also how to transport hydrogen, and also how to deliver the hydrogen to our end users. Yeah. So we are going to invest in the value chain, on the whole value chain of hydrogen energy. And we are currently working together with Pak Zainal from a utility company, and also with the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources to set up the national roadmap of hydrogen energy implementations. We are open and encourage strong collaborations among many companies, many stakeholders, and also support, policy support from the government to enable us accelerate this hydrogen economy or hydrogen energy. Indonesia is blessed with so many renewable resources. Geothermal is there, biomass is there, hydro is there, and not to mention solar PV and also wind that has been mentioned by Zainal earlier. So we are planning to utilize those renewable energy resources to produce green hydrogens. And we also have this depleted oil well or gas well as well. So we plan to utilize those depleted oil and gas well for CO2 storage system. So both blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, CCUS is being studied and planned to be invested by Pertamina.
Thank you, Mr. Andianto. I will go back to Ruth Kampener. Ruth, could you please briefly present the current additionality rules in the delegated act and explain why the EU Commission is interested in imposing certain rules from the onset?
Indeed. The delegated act indeed is a fancy word of essentially a legislative proposal which we are putting forward, which describes a number of criteria which a producer of renewable hydrogen needs to adhere to. And the reason why we set these rules out already today is because already in 2018 we put a proposal in place where we request every member state to have a certain share of renewable energy in their transport sector. And that renewable energy share can also be met by hydrogen, renewable hydrogen-based products. So this is why we want to set out those rules as soon as possible. Now, our new proposals are are going even further and set dedicated targets also for industry and dedicated targets. So that's why we need those rules as soon as possible. Now, at the same time, we also understand that hydrogen is still a nascent market. So we're also looking at giving some short-term flexibility whilst putting kind of the long-term rules in place, which ensure investment certainty for those project developers. So what do we ask essentially? And the main point that we're asking is that renewable hydrogen production comes together with the new development of renewable electricity. And the reason is relatively simple. If we look at both renewable electricity production today in Europe as well as globally, we still are at very low shares in most countries. There are a couple of exceptions, but most countries have still a lot of opportunities to grow renewable power generation. And if we now, in this current stage, would allow existing renewable power generation to be taken away by hydrogen producers, that of course means less renewable electricity to satisfy the demand of existing consumers. And of course, it would also not allow us to quickly reduce the amount of fossil-based power generation which takes place in most countries. So what we're essentially saying is that if you produce renewable hydrogen, you need to do that at the times that this new renewable asset in your portfolio is also producing the renewable electricity. And this way we can really make sure that we are also supporting the energy transition, while at the same time already kind of leapfrogging and developing this renewable hydrogen. The second reason why we want to make sure that this hydrogen production is taking place at the same time that the renewable production is, the renewable generation is producing, is because if you would take simply electricity from the grid, in those systems which have a relatively small share of renewable electricity, the overall CO2 emissions would actually be higher than if you would simply use fossil-based hydrogen production. So we're also saying that if you produce this at the same time, and when the renewable electricity is producing, then of course your emissions are very, very low because you're using renewable electricity. If you're producing it from the grid, then only if you meet and ensure that CO2 emissions are reduced, only then you can use and kind of claim a percentage of that hydrogen being produced to be renewable. So that's in a nutshell what this Delegated Act does. Now, it's important for us that the rules that we set within the EU also apply for importers of that renewable hydrogen into the EU. And as was mentioned before by a colleague from the OECD, there is also still a funding gap within the EU. So we are setting specific rules, and we have a whole kind of financing scheme to essentially help both member states but also end consumers to be able to pay for this renewable hydrogen. And that combination of having the rules in place, having the funding in place, we think will be able to kind of kickstart this hydrogen developments both within the EU, but also kickstart this global hydrogen market for renewables.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much. I've been told that we can try to get back to Emanuele Bianco. Is Emanuele
Thank you.
Bianco?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I had internet connection issues. I would continue without video to
okay.
use the bandwidth properly. So if I can see my slides, I can continue. I don't.
So
I actually
please.
don't know where it was stopped. Okay, so we were still at the policy pillar 2, and I was trying to say that when we produce hydrogen to provide a service, we have to compare it, this consumption of electricity with the potential consumption that would happen if we decide to go to an electrification route. And sometimes the difference is very stark. And it's really one of the index to be considered when we want to compare possible uses and prioritize certain uses over others. So next slide, please. And I would like to say that in ARENA we assessed all the wider technology portfolio that of the technologies that can be used to decarbonize each part of our energy sectors. So the main message here is hydrogen is one of the potential means to decarbonize our energy sector, but it's not the only one. We still have the good old renewables, the electrification, and the energy efficiency. So let's keep this in mind. Next slide, please. And then the third policy pillar, the third element to consider is the guarantees of origin. I'm sure that the speakers mentioned this a lot, but in any case, it's very important when we are developing our green hydrogen policies to consider the fact that hydrogen is unrecognizable from gray, blue, green at the consumption point. So we will need a certification that says this hydrogen has been produced in this way, using this electricity, with a certain additionality, as Ruud mentioned, and so on and so forth, and transported in this way and used in this way. Otherwise, we risk to give a lifeline to less sustainable ways to produce hydrogen. So there is a lot going on. This report that is here linked was produced 3 years ago, and since then a lot of efforts has been made to clarify what is green hydrogen, basically. Next slide, please. The fourth policy pillar, the fourth element to be considered when drafting green hydrogen policies is to consider the fact that the energy sector itself has been designed for fossil fuels. And there are a lot of elements that needs to be updated in order to actually make green hydrogen part of this energy sector. For example, how we collect statistics, or the code and standards, or the fact that we are going to need new industrial policies, meaning protecting an industry that usually is not protected. I would like to highlight one example. Recently, in Italy, hydrogen has been recognized as an energy vector. And this element itself allowed the policymakers, the regulators, to exempt hydrogen from electricity levies. And this is an example on how updating the current rules can provide a benefit for hydrogen without the need to create additional subsidies or additional policies. So this is the fourth policy pillar. And this would conclude the pillars, and I would like to present another thing. Click, please. Next slide. While we are talking about all these hydrogen policies, local production is still not there. There is still little going on, but at the same time, we are seeing a new world of hydrogen trade. Basically, what we are seeing is that a lot of new MOUs, a lot of new trade agreements are being signed between countries, and in particular around two poles, Europe and East Asia. And this means that the hydrogen sector is going to become an oligopsony with few demand centers setting the rules for hydrogen, setting what hydrogen they want, how it should be produced, what certification schemes to use, and so on and so forth. And this is very important because since we have two poles, we can see now the market trying to move between one or the other pole. One more green Europe and one less technological agnostic East Asia. And what I would like to present here is the fact that being Europe more having stricter limits for CO2 emissions, it's likely that the producers that will be able to produce hydrogen for the European market will be able to sell it all around the world because it will have a higher quality and it will be adaptable to any market in the future. This is not a set deal, things will change, but again, I would like to stress the fact that few demand centers are going to delineate the hydrogen market in the future. Next slide, please. As I said, there is a lot of to be done, and in IRENA we developed some studies to provide to policymakers and the general public an idea on understanding on what policies are needed. It's quite a lot. We started presenting them because it's basically an innovation policy. There is little examples that can be used. So in the future, we hope to see a wave of policies that will support green hydrogen. And this will actually conclude my presentation. Sorry again for the interruption before, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Emanuele Bianco, for addressing the topic. But if we still have a little bit of time, and I would like to ask a question for Emanuele Bianco. What are IRENA's view on the hydrogen issue? How crucial is hydrogen in the grand scenario to achieve the decarbonization of power system? I mean, compared with the other renewables options. Can you share your thought on this? Thank you.
Yes, sure. In IRENA, as was presented in the previous session, we believe that hydrogen will have an important role in a net zero scenario. Hydrogen will cut the emission by 12%, which is a sizable amount, and make hydrogen a necessary part of the energy transition. There will be no net zero scenario without green hydrogen. And it's easy to say why. There are some elements of the energy sector that cannot be decarbonized but with green hydrogen. The alternative is basically not to consume. And that's also the other part, which is circular economy and energy efficiency, and avoid unnecessary consumption. But at the core, there will still be a need for steel, even just to produce new wind farms, or ammonia for fertilizers and for shipping. So there is a need for green hydrogen in the future. The total amount in our scenario is 614 megatons, which is around 7 times current pure hydrogen production, or 5 terawatt of electrolysis. So there is a big role for hydrogen and a larger market to be tapped.
Thank you very much, Emanuele Bianco. So that we are all agree that there will be no scenario without the green hydrogen. So green hydrogen seems to be a must. Now we have come to the end of this session. I would like to thank all the panelists, Kumi Kitamori, Mr. Zainal Arifin, Mr. Adianto Hidayat, and Ruth Kempener, and also Emanuele Bianco of IRENA. Also, I would like to thank all the audience that participating in this sessions. Thank you. Good evening, and back to you, Claudia. Thanks.
A very interesting and insightful discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we'd like to thank the moderator, Dr. Oka, and also our speaker and panelist, Mr. Emmanuel Bianco, Mr. Adianto, Mr. Root, Mr. Zainal, Ms. Kumi Kitamori. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now entering the closing session. And to close today's event, we'd like to invite Dr. Prahoro Nur Cahyo, co-chair of the Energy Transition Working Group, G20 Indonesia 2022, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources Indonesia, to deliver the closing remarks.
All distinguished speakers and participants, greetings to you all. Good afternoon from Jakarta. As co-chair of ETWG, I am pleased to conclude this comprehensive webinar. In today's webinar, we have been discovering the role of hydrogen and energy storage in providing green energy and reducing emissions. I must say that today's discussion on exploring the role of green hydrogen and energy storage in enhancing and supporting renewable energy production worldwide have been very dynamic. Reflecting these core areas of discussions, I have taken note of several essential key points. First, renewable-based hydrogen and energy storage are becoming the key enablers of innovative technologies in encountering multifaceted issues of energy transitions. These two technologies will also bring forward the most ambitious desire to upscale transitions toward clean and green energy. Hydrogen will become a key enabler for various sources on renewable energy development. Case in point, to combat intermittency issues through variable renewable energy. In this significance, hydrogen will be ideally developed alongside the electrification of energy sectors. Hydrogen will also sustain the existing natural gas infrastructure, avoiding the risk of stranded assets in clean energy transitions. Second, as key enabler for innovative technologies, hydrogen and energy storage are the future. Hydrogen in specific will play an essential role in reducing emissions in hard-to-abate sectors, in heavy industry sectors such as steel production, mining, heavy transport, and chemical industries where electrification is difficult to be implemented. The urgency to abate those carbon-intensive sectors is fast becoming the common challenge and concerns in the G20, the forum of the largest economies as well as industrial countries. Third, we need a stronger international cooperation in hydrogen and energy storage. As key enablers of innovative technologies, both hydrogen and energy storage affect the broader parts of supply chains in clean energy production. With the increase of technological innovations and economic scale, we will witness a significant leap in hydrogen and energy storage trade, far beyond any of our projections. This will require multi-level partnership in the global and regional sphere to ensure their accessibility, affordability, and security of those technologies. Moving forward, we are planning to amplify the recommendations, practices, and experiences in packing hydrogen and energy storage into the contents of the key deliverables of G20 ETWG at the G20 ministerial level and leaders level. As we continue our G20 ETWG virtual webinar series, join us in the next webinar on the biofuels for a green economy. I look forward to see you again very soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the technical issue. We are still waiting to get connected again to Dr. Prahoro. Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our event today, and we all thank you for your participation. Before we end the webinar, kindly check your chat box to find the survey link. We appreciate your effort to fill the survey. And for your information, this webinar is screened live and recorded, and the video of this webinar is available on Kementerian ESDM's YouTube channel. We will see you again soon, and thank you very much for your participation in making this event a success.